Avatar, the new film from James Cameron, has come to Ecuador. It's a story about destruction of nature and indigenous people. The Amazon's inhabitants are curious to see if Cameron's vision comes close to their reality.
La vida de los Achuar, más que todo su futuro.
Achua life, its future, its progress, its people, from the individual person to the collective, can be interpreted through the medium of dreams.
This is Jim Cameron, and you are watching No Good TV. Hell yeah.
You're the head motherfucker in charge.
Because I am the HMFIC, which translates as, and not in Navi, but in English, translates as head motherfucker in charge.
They arrive in Quito, excited and curious. One Achuar leader wonders, how will the Navi defend themselves against extraction?
The communities themselves that fight in defense of their territory, I would like to see that. That is the most important for us, especially to educate our children.
Seeing a film on the big screen is new for most Amazonians, not to mention in 3D.
Is it fair to say that this is like the most expensive porno for the imagination for the Viagra ecstasy generation?
You can say that. That's not exactly what I was going for, but it sounds good.
In a word, yes.
The Navi may be from another planet, but their story and their connection to nature feel familiar.
It left a huge impression on us. For example, the movies are almost real. It's an example that makes us think a lot because the indigenous are defending their rights.
The indigenous have already opened the door to conversation, to dialogue. But supposedly the government cooperates, then closes the dialogue. So what is that supposed to mean? That I do something similar to what we saw in the movie? This could happen because we are ready. We are not afraid.
I think that people may not actually need drugs or sex after seeing this film because it will give you enough of both.
You're not doing it right.
Oh, damn it!
Avatar is good, but it ain't that good.
Oh, it's good. Oh, it's that good.
Yeah, and fuck you up, huh?
Yes.
You're tall, but I'm standing in front of you.
It's a podcast.
Welcome to You're Tall, but I'm Standing in Front of You, the podcast where two friends circling the drain of academia examine the cultural detritus of the 20th century. I'm Devin.
I'm Ethan.
How's it going, buddy?
It's going great.
Awesome.
All right, I'm glad that we caught up with one another there.
Yeah. I ask you that every episode, and the subtext of it is always that we've just been through some kind of horrific experience that we're about to decompress from, but we're still maintaining the illusion that we're doing okay. But we have a very special episode this week, month, whatever irregular interval at which we release these. We're joined by JD Connor. JD is associate professor in the Division of Cinema and Media Studies at University of Southern California. He's the author of Hollywood Math and Aftermath, The Economic Image and the Digital Recession, and The Studios After the Studios, Neoclassical Hollywood, 1970 to 2010. He's written tons of articles in tons of places. I'll put a somewhat self-serving plug out for his piece on Nicolas Cage with the Contemporaries at Post 45 series. That was for a cluster that I edited with Kimberly Kyogi Andrews. JD, welcome to the pod.
Thanks for having me. I'm eager to talk about Avatar.
That's right, because folks, we are back in the James Cameron zone. Like, we haven't been there since what, our Aliens episode?
Yeah, second episode.
Which are probably our most unhinged episode.
Yeah.
But as we talked about, in the Aliens episode, James Cameron just, in ways I don't understand, is plugged into capital and channeling it and producing these films that somehow make massive amounts of money. And in the case of Avatar, while seemingly having no cultural impact, right? So we're very happy to have JD here with us to try to figure out how the movie that has made kind of more money than any other movie also is one that no one seems to remember or recall. Right in the wake of Avatar 2 finally coming out soon, right? So coming out this December?
Yes, it's in the can. The trailer is out. The people who are indentured to work with James Cameron are able to breathe a temporary sigh of relief, and now the marketing people are in charge. But they did 2 and 3 at the same time, so they're like, I think he told them to take a weekend and then they could come back and start cutting on.
Yeah. So we're gonna go from 1 Avatar to 3 Avatars very quickly. That is like acceleration,
exponential growth there.
That's right.
Yeah, because we talk about Avatar 2 a lot on this podcast as like a thing that is never going to happen. It's almost like a joke. Avatar 2, it's like that friend that you see that you like are passing by, like, oh, we should hang out sometime, with the idea that like it's never going to actually happen. It's a nicety. Yeah. It's like, oh yeah, well, Avatar 2, can't wait to see that when it hits theaters. But now it's actually happening. There is a set date, and so we're kind of locked in now where we can't avoid Avatar 2.
It does kind of feel like we're in this era too, where the last, like, I don't know, 10, 20 years, I feel like there were all of these like sequels and like works that were never supposed to come out. Like the new Duke Nukem game, was like Duke Nukem Forever. Like it was, the joke of the 90s was it was never going to come out. We reached a point at some time where like they were just like, oh, we have to actually start releasing these things or never coming out, because like Chinese Democracy, right? The Guns N' Roses album, right? All these things have actually come out. We don't even have the cultural experience of the thing that's never coming out anymore.
We even have Top Gun 2, right? Matt Patches famously said that this movie is never coming out, and if it does, I'll eat a shoe. And there's a 20-minute video of him basically constructing and then eating the shoe now that the Top Gun movie is out.
Oh,
it's lovely. He made it out of fruit leather, so like that was his workaround.
That's a little bit of a cop out. Werner Herzog ate a real shoe.
Well, he kept trying. He contacted all these shoe manufacturers and said, "Can I eat your shoes?" Like he would call up like vegan shoe places and be like, "Is it edible?" And they would not get back to him for various wise liability reasons. So he didn't want to cheat. And in fact, I'm now spoiling the whole video, so that's fine. The good folks at Paramount sent him a cake in the shape of a shoe, and he said, "I that would be cheating. I won't do that. So I will make a shoe out of something, wear it on my foot, and then eat it." And he has done so.
Nice.
It's a real shoe in the sense that it was on his foot. Anyway, the point being, all the sequels are here, even for those of us who have dined out on the fact that they aren't coming. Now we have to eat our words and shoes.
So the perfect time to, as probably a lot of people are now, watching the trailer for Avatar, what is it, The Way of Water?
Yeah.
And
he loves water. James Cameron loves water.
Yeah, he does. But right, being like, okay, so what exactly was Avatar again? And so, as we always do, we'll go through the plot a little bit, but also, if you want, you could just go watch like Dances with Wolves or Pocahontas or something, and then just like imagine everyone is giant and blue. But anyway, here we go. So Avatar, it's the future. I forget exactly when in the future it is, but
the 2050s. It's not very
nice.
far off.
Yeah, not crazy far. And we're introduced to Jake Sully. He is a wheelchair-bound Marine. His brother has been killed, who was like the sort of like golden child, some kind of STEM PhD guy who's involved with this project, this like Avatar project. And basically because he has the same genetics as his brother, he, you know, to save money, because they've developed this like, you know, giant blue body that the people can, the scientists can like, I don't know, matrix themselves into or whatever, like transport their consciousness into and pilot. They don't want to waste that one. So they're like, you know, okay, we'll get you and you could just be like the security guy or something. But so he finds himself going to Pandora. We never really see Earth, but the implication is like things are bad.
There's nothing green on Earth, we are told. Yeah. Like it's you know, it's Blade Runner times 10. We're led to believe.
Yeah. And I think like implications, there's a lot of like economically motivated crime too, via the sort of the fact that Jake's brother has been mugged and killed. Like there's sort of like urban blight, you know, social decline sort of stuff going on. And so Pandora is this kind of idyllic planet inhabited by the Na'vi, who are the giant Smurf people, that is covered in this, or not covered in, but is underneath the surface is full of this, I actually like aptly named substance called unobtainium. I like the like campiness of it being called, right?
Yeah.
Unobtainium. That basically it's like a corporation, right? It is a private corporation headed by Giovanni Ribisi, the guy who loves the punter. Are there to try to get, right? And so you kind of have the private security people who are kind of just like have a lot of like militaristic iconography and trappings, who just kind of want to go in guns blazing and take this stuff. And then the scientists led by Sigourney Weaver, who like want to kind of, their idea is basically by like,
I want to know what you think their idea is.
Yeah.
What do you think their long-term plan is with this whole operation?
It seems to be like by like inhabiting these like blue people bodies, we're gonna like make friends and they're gonna like give us the unobtainium nicely. Is that how you guys understand it?
They have to move is the problem. This is a removal story, right? It's not like, you know, it's not like they're going to frack the unobtainium by drilling somewhere else and turning 90 degrees under the surface of the planet. As fate would have it, the center of the sentient planet is, you know, and their godhead is positioned directly above the key deposit of this stuff. And so they got to move. And the scientists, and I think, you know, like, having struggled through the rewatch, I think one of the things that actually is present that I didn't pick up on, which there's very little that is actually present, but sort of only implicit in this movie, it is that the scientists are clearly shown to be deluding themselves about this even before Jake arrives. Like they seem to think that there is some, as Ethan says, plan that isn't going to be guns blazing. And there clearly is not. And I believe that like that's one of the like two implicit things in this movie, that they like can't acknowledge that they really are, you know, just the point of the spear.
Yeah, and it's interesting, right? Because like the scientists who have all this like expertise supposedly, and like they speak the Na'vi language and stuff, don't seem to realize that this is going to be a no-go. Jake Sully very quickly is like, oh, like this is a sacred tree, they're not leaving. Like, but so anyway, you know, the scientists are very resistant to Jake Sully being there. He's a jughead, you know, blah blah blah.
He's a jarhead.
Jarhead, sorry.
Jughead's our friend from Riverdale.
I can't believe I've lost all my credibility with our military listeners. I'm known for my extensive knowledge about these things. Yeah, he's a jarhead. Obviously, there's this like kind of disability thing going on with how, because he can't walk in his human body, but can in his avatar body. Like the first time he does it, he's kind of overwhelmed by the capacity to stand and walk again, and he kind of like rips all the sensors off his body and just kind of like sprints through the compound. They end up doing their kind of like first excursion. They encounter a lot of like strange wildlife, and Jake kind of reveals he doesn't really know what he's doing, doesn't really know, hasn't done the reading, essentially. And then the, what is her name? The Zoe Saldana character shows up.
Right.
Natiri, who is a female Na'vi, is sort of like betrothed to the heir to the chieftain, and is going to be the next like kind of like Reverend Mother type figure. She's going to kill him, or kill. It was never clear to me, if you kill an avatar body, is it like Matrix rules? Does like the person die, or do they just wake up in their pod? Because that's never really addressed. Because
I feel like the one secondary character who also arrives when Jake Sully arrives. Yeah, like I think at the end his avatar body destroyed, and he like wakes up. He's like, ugh.
Yes. Yeah. No. That happens to Norm. Like, yeah, it's not Matrix rules.
Oh, okay.
Because it's a consciousness link, not a consciousness transport. Mm-hmm. And so it's much closer to the Pacific Rim model of two things being in sync than a kind of metempsychosis, until, not to spoil a movie that's this old, we get to the climactic moment when the tree modem does the actual consciousness transport.
Right. Yeah, I somehow missed that. I mean, I got to be honest. During the really long fight scene at the end, I was starting to glaze over a little bit.
I'll also, like, there's a decent chance that some of this stuff gets retconned, like in the future sequels, because one of the advantages we talk about a lot about the disadvantages of not having a cultural footprint, but one of the real advantages is that no one's going to give a shit if you change the rules about how consciousness migration works. In these next installments.
I mean, they could bring Michelle Rodriguez back. Like, they could be like, listen, she what do you call it? Pulled the cord and got out of that helicopter before it was blown up. No one grieved her death at all. Like, people were just like immediately moving on.
Yeah.
No, I mean, we know that Sigourney Weaver is coming back, or her character is in the credits.
Yeah.
So
yeah. So anyway, like Natari,
she decides not to kill him.
Yeah, well, because she gets this like sign from like the planet, basically.
Yeah.
Which what do they call? It's not Anya, but it sounds like
Awa.
The kind of like Gaia sort of like planet spirit that the in the Na'vi sort of worldview. Like this little, like, I don't know, it's like this little like dandelion looking thing that kind of like lands on her bow.
Yeah, they're little wood sprites, and they move like jellyfish. And if our listeners were on the Zoom, they would see me making sort of the jellyfish move. And they cluster around this utter non-entity, Jake Sully, and Natiri is gobsmacked at this.
Yeah, and so basically, this is taken to be a sign. Jake Sully starts kind of like integrating himself quite well with the Na'vi in ways the scientists haven't been able to, but also very quickly realizes that the Na'vi are not going to move.
Right.
The sort of like the antagonist of this movie, more so than Giovanni Ribisi, ends up being the head of the like security detail, Quaritch, played by Stephen Lang, who's got very much kind of this like rugged like colonel thing going on, big scars on his head, and he kind of basically becomes the prime mover at a certain point. Is like we're going in, it's war, and then like just to accelerate things a little bit, basically Jake Sully ends up marshaling the various Na'vi tribes together, and you kind of get basically like the last part of Return of the Jedi, sort of like indigenous resistance to technologically superior forces, and then the big thing is that actually proves to be insufficient, and they're kind of getting their ass kicked until Jake Sully has previously kind of like made up like kind of plugged, because they have these like tail things that plug into stuff, which they use for everything from like flying like little flying horse things to having sex. They're like multi-use, like little like natural USB plugs they have. He kind of plugs into the planet and he's like, Awa, if you're real, like, you got to help us out. And sort of the entire planet ends up kind of like coming to the battle. So like all of the like, the kind of wildlife we've previously seen, some of which are like predators normally, join in, and Stephen Lang is killed, and the Na'vi are victorious. Giovanni Ribisi sort of gets like sent off the planet with his tail between his legs, and as JD alluded to, in like the final scene, Jake Sully decides he wants to become like Na'vi like permanently. So like they use the power of the tree to fully upload his consciousness. Our last shot is of the Avatar eye opening, which is also, I think, like, I don't know if it's the exact same shot, but it's like in a lot of like the posters and stuff for Avatar, it's like this like shot of one of these like yellow eyes with the blue skin, and then we get the triumphant credit music. And the forces of capital have been defeated.
That's right.
Yeah.
In there, you missed the grand romantic alliance where Jake isn't just Natiri's student, but ultimately her lover.
Of course, yeah.
He goes through all the tribal rituals, the content of which is entirely empty. It's just the ritual. There's no description, like even a movie like Black Panther will take 5 seconds to say, this is the sacred herb, this show you how they process it, talk about its prevalence and scarcity. These things just move along. But anyway, but the romance is there. Yeah, and that's going to be, crucial to like sort of upsetting the internal dynamics of the Na'vi, which paves the way for.
Yeah,
Jake.
We should say one of the big things he does that kind of like convinces the Na'vi that he's for real is they have these like kind of like pterodactyl things they fly around on, and like you kind of like you essentially mate with one for life. That is like your pterodactyl thing. These things all have names. If you get the like lore books, I don't know what those are, but there's one that's like, I don't know if it's like the same species and it's like the king, but it's like a lot bigger and more deadly than the others, right? And there's like a legend of like, there's a Na'vi that did fly one of these and they've got like its skull like on display. And Jake Sully is able to tame one of these. Right. And this is kind of like key to sort of the way the white savior thing is happening in this, I think, is like we're not given any reasons why really he would have this capacity. He just kind of does. Like he just sort of innately happens to be really good at this stuff. I don't know.
The one line that implies that there's something that he's got is that it's strategic in that he figures that the giant Leonopteryx, which is they call Taruk. I'm so sorry. Anyway,
that's right.
That this is the biggest, baddest guy in the skies, and so never needs to look up. And so he takes his Banshee Jake takes his Banshee and flies above the Turok, and then basically just Mission Impossible's his way down onto its back, and mates with it. And I don't want to talk about, I mean, we can talk about it. I'm saying it is problematic, the level of odd consent that like these humanoids have with the various animals they force mate with. In any case, he lands on the Turok's back, mates with it. And so it was his strategic training as a military, a guy with military experience that enabled him to sort of see around this corner. And so there is a kind of, foretaste of the sense that that guerrilla tactics and strategies are something that Jake possesses, and that would in fact be something that the Na'vi would need, except of course, as you say, it doesn't go anywhere. They all get clobbered. All the people we like almost get killed or die gloriously and get killed. And so it's only when all the beasts of the fields and the birds of the sky heed the calling of Awa that like the planet can in effect rise up as one. But
yeah. It's this like massive like nature is healing moment.
That's right.
Disease.
And nature is healing involves, the hammerhead, like rhinoceroses, the sort of like the wolves that are very dog-like, the six-legged horses, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Moving, they're basically possessing, it's this fantasy of like, what if, you could convince not even just the entire like proletariat or the entire like oppressed classes or peoples, but literally every living being at once in concert. It's this fantasy of pressing it reminds me of when we did the Kingsman, Ethan.
Mm-hmm.
And the villain in the Kingsman like turns to Lenin and he's like, all right, do your revolution. Like there's this button you can press, right? Like if we could just find there's a USB cable somewhere in like Croatia, maybe like in the mountains, and if we just plugged in a phone that was playing like the right episode of Chapo Trap House, the planet would be like, oh shit, let me get this, let me take care of this.
Yeah.
So something I want to talk about that really struck me in like the first 3.5 minutes of this movie. I gotta say, the first 3.5 minutes of this movie were kind of blowing my mind in some ways, before it kind of settled into its like full Dances with Wolves thing. Just because I didn't remember how much of the beginning of this is about money. Like Jake's brother is killed, like the literal line is like for the paper in his pocket, right? And then when they're convincing Jake to take his place, there's this crazy scene where it's like there's a shot of the brother's body in a cardboard box being pushed into an incinerator. And then there's like some shots of spaceships in between all this, but you basically cut from that to Jake sort of staring not into the camera, but in the direction of the camera generally, while these two military guys behind him are like telling him, convincing him to do it. And their last line is, and the pay's good, very good. And then we cut to the brother's body being incinerated. And it's like, it's interesting to me how this movie that made like more money than any other movie, right? It totally hinges just on the fact that like Jake Sully doesn't have any money, right? Like his disability, we're told very early that like they've had the technology to fix his inability to walk for a long time, but he can't afford it, right? And there's like a line was like not on like a military salary or something. So yeah, I don't know if you guys have any thoughts about this, but just like I was really struck by how much like economic motivation is kind of front loaded into this movie. It kind of falls away a little bit as we just get into sort of the more like,
sure,
woohoo nature stuff. But yeah.
I'll give one quick thought that I had, and I think we can dig deeper into it. Is just when I was watching that scene, to me, the question in the back of my mind was always like, well, did they just like kill his brother to get like the military guy to go in his place? Because again, it's all advancing towards this point, the end conclusion of which is we're going to send in the army and raise this place. So it works out really well for them that suddenly it's like a military dude that's coming in to essentially infiltrate the Avatar program. So I was always wondering, was it a random act of violence, or to rob his brother that maybe went wrong, or was there something more to it? Who can say? Maybe they'll explain it in Avatar 2, The Way of the Water.
But that's exactly the kind of non-implicitness that makes this movie so forgettable. Like there'll be so much more of this later on, but even the slightest like exchange of glances between those military guys, even the slightest like, cutaway shot of Jake's brother getting killed, that just makes it a little murky, would have been enough to fire the imaginations of a certain group of fans who would then have said, this is baked in from the beginning. It's like, and you didn't have to, yes, this is the way things are decisively now, but even back then you had decades of that kind of implicitness available to you. The Alien franchise is a really good version of that, with all of the sort of, implicit conspiracy theorizing around Weyland-Yutani inside the story. And we know that Cameron had experience with that. He just doesn't do any of that. I'm always,
Okay.
I was just gonna say, like, I think that's totally right, Ethan, that there's like, the way that causality gets swamped makes it seem like it's just super incompetent about money. And it clearly is, but at the same time, it's totally obsessed with it. And so like, why would somebody who is obsessed with these monetary things not bother to pull out the yellow legal pad and like go through it? And it's like, how much does it cost to get your legs? How much is unobtainium worth a pound? How much does the Avatar body development cost that? It makes sense to find the guy who won the genetic lottery, literally, rather than just like scrap that Avatar body. All of those things could figure into that, and we don't really get them. We don't get that scale. And if what you assume is that the money's just the MacGuffin to get it off the ground, then you assume that the movie doesn't take seriously anything that it's doing, and that doesn't seem right either. I that's why I find it very baffling. But yeah. Also, and this is something a lot of people have pointed out, these Avatar bodies are so expensive that it's worth basically destroying your scientific program in order to like retain one of them, but they don't have like a tracker on them. So when Jake falls over the falls and he gets lost, he can literally be lost. Like how I mean, it's not like he falls into the place where you can't track things, which there is conveniently on the planet. But like, anyway, money, very strange in this movie.
Yeah, because it's like it's funny to like, because like Ethan, I never would have thought of that, like your conspiracy angle, which is really interesting, right? And it would have been totally like reasonable. We get so much first person narration from Jake Sully in this movie that like that's like the movie would not have to be doing something different formally from what it wants to do in that way to give us some of like even Jake's own doubts about this or anything, right? But Jake like accepts what's happening like exactly on the surface. And it feels like, this is a world with like conspiratorial, like content we associate with conspiracy, right? But like, it doesn't want to think conspiratorially. It wants to think in terms of like fate. Which is interesting to me because it's like, it's kind of similar in a way because it's like everything means something and leads to something else, but it does kind of like foreclose causality because it's just like pure like dominoes. You know what I mean? It's like the meaning of the money stuff becomes that it leads Jake down this particular path. The meaning of the jellyfish things is that it, has these particular result, but it all is just sort of because we need to end up in the place where Jake is like the one, and like, but it makes me want to be like, is the movie saying something more critical about capitalism? But I just can't decide if it is or not.
Well, who's the one in this movie? Well, clearly it's this guy who doesn't even have a real last name. Like, his last name should have been Sullivan. Sully is the nickname. Doesn't make any sense. Sully as a last name just sounds like he has dirtified everything. So it's more of the on the nose allegory of the anyway. But the one in this movie is still Cameron, right? Like, it's like, so the way I always resolve these questions of, is this movie critical of or not critical of, is to just sort of say, well, the movie clearly thinks that it's James Cameron's story. So what is James Cameron getting out of this? And he's going to be critical of certain people who have to fund his crazy projects and totally dependent on them to fund his crazy projects. And that ambivalence helps explain, or I don't think it entirely exhausts, but it comes pretty close to explaining why it looks like he's obsessed with money, resentful as hell about the fact that he can't get all the money that he wants, absolutely profligate, but for a good reason, he would say, with the money that he's got, and unable to sort out his allegiances between like the tanning bed technology that lets you migrate your consciousness and these totally cool, like ornithopter, like double rotor helicopters that he's also totally, he's totally into.
Yeah.
So I think the ambivalence is his structural position as much as anything else.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And like the specificity of the Avatar body, right, seems that's really like important to this film, right? Because and like obviously the name of the movie is Avatar, and like that is the crucial object, right? Like is this body that everyone's so concerned we've pumped so much money into we can't let go to waste, like you were saying. Like if this movie was just like about the blue people still, but like without the Avatar premise, and it was just like Jake joins the Avatar people, but like just as a human, like with a gun or whatever, it doesn't give Cameron that same kind of ability to be saying that it's not just that one particular person can like ideologically, side against, capital or against extractivism or whatever. It's that specifically like the movie, right, as sort of indexed by the Avatar body, this bloated, expensive, probably wasteful thing, it is the thing that then allows for that to happen. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Like,
right. Well, I'll try to put it this way. The thing that the movie wants to do in its experiential basis, and this is a movie driven by our experience of it, not by our analysis of it, he would have said, is to convince you that the experience of seeing Avatar is like moving your consciousness into the Avatar body. So it's the index for those things, it's the figure for those things, and that's the way he's going to use it as the metonym for the solidarity he imagines he can create in its wake. When he is in his sort of maximal king of the world version of himself, that's what we're getting out of Avatar. And so it is projective, and that's and we know that, like, again, this is one of the other really like fascinating moments, that when Jake is not in his body, and he is, or not in his Avatar body, and he is with Neytiri, he is so small and so frail looking, and such it's almost the Pietà, right? She's cradling this wounded body in the Airstream trailer where they like do this consciousness moving when they go camping. And it's so strange. And there's no way that the Na'vi society could possibly imagine itself as saved by this little pale wounded guy, and his diminutiveness as a body. It's really important that we see his like wasted, atrophied legs a lot. It's In that sense, it's the sort of Captain Dan from Forrest Gump, like hyper display of the consequences of his disability. Anyway, he has to be projected into something else. We have to be projected into something else. Cameron would say, you can't just sort of be yourself. Like, look at yourself. You're pathetic.
Yeah. But it seems like it's so important that the movie was also like this, that 3D was so important to this movie, right? And that was a big part of its like marketing, right? I remember was like, say what you will about this movie, but you've got to go see this 3D technology. It's going to blow your mind, was like kind of like the pitch. A lot of like in the word of mouth was like a lot of what I remember hearing back, because I wasn't necessarily someone that was interested in this movie from like a plot standpoint, but I did end up going to see it in theaters and paying my whatever it was back then, probably less than a normal ticket costs now, but like that idea of like becoming part of the world, like the investment in immersion, and I remember there were all these like news stories around when Avatar came out and I don't know to what extent these were even true or they were like exaggerations or urban legends, but this idea that people kept killing themselves because they couldn't live in Pandora. Do you guys remember those stories?
Yeah, that it rings a bell. It was some of that. It was a lot of like people really getting into the cosplay element, maybe to a greater extent than would be perceived as a healthy. I think there was a lot of those sorts of stories, which again is very interesting because there's a lot of gaps in terms of what the hell is going on in the world of Avatar that you would be so drawn into that maybe you're just filling the gaps yourself. I don't know.
Yeah.
But filling them in a very different way than like the Star Wars expanded universe filled in, and we'll come back. Yeah, there was a lot of that coverage of the experiential hangover of going to Pandora, and clearly the Fox, marketing department was doing a lot for that. It was. There were signs at the box office that it was an intense experience. There were all of the sort of like, can you handle this kinds of moments? Now, I'm sure it also got out of hand. It was 2009. We were, in the beginning throes of the largest, economic contraction that we had seen in the West since the Great Depression, et cetera. So, and we'll certainly come back to that. But it's a crisis point. And it was a crisis point, not just socially, but also, as you were saying, technologically. This was really the movie that the studios used to drive the forced conversion to digital projection everywhere, even when, even if not everybody converted everything to 3D, but everything went digital. At that point, 35 became really an endangered format, and they could use this as part of the club in order to do that. And that was, clearly a place where Cameron's allegiances and the studio's allegiances aligned. Always perfect projection, never dependent on some minimum wage, jockey in a mall, not watching the print collapse over the course of its run. All of those kinds of things were stuff that James Cameron would say all the time. I mean, he wasn't alone, obviously. George Lucas was out there. The Pixar folks were really out there as part of this. This was a widespread consensus, but the sense that it was immersive and that you were projected into it was going to be the key leader to that. Here I'll get like really kind of my day job version of this. I teach a class. We have an IMAX theater at USC. To train people how to use IMAX cameras and think about large format stuff. And so I teach a class on the history of mega cinema, sort of giant screen formats and other sorts of giant formats, really long movies, really giant movies, whatever. It's purpose-built stuff. And one of the things that's striking about Avatar as an instance of that is the ways in which it does duplicate some of the earlier foundational kind of problems that those movies had. Cinerama is probably the most useful comparison. So Cinerama was this crazy 3 projector, multi it was three projectors at the same time, a huge curved screen. The screen is so bowed that it can't be a single piece of fabric because it would have reflected off on itself. So it's done as a sort of vertical blind with hundreds of vertical strips next to each other. It's incredibly complicated to keep using because you needed, not just the three projectionists on the cameras, but the soundtrack was done on a separate piece of 35. Anyway, it was a great big deal. And of that generation of boomers who went to see it, it built out very, very slowly. They all remember it. It was a very procedural, processual kind of thing. High dollar ticket, fixed seat, like going to a theater is now, like going to a legitimate theater was for a long time. You got a program and so on. But the movies that you watched were basically travel logs up until the very end of the process. And if you ask people what happened in This Is Cinerama, the very first one, the most successful movie of 1952 and 53, they'll say, well, you do this thing where you go on a roller coaster and it starts small and then it gets really big and you're totally immersed. And they say, that's great. And then what else happens? And none of them remember, or they remember little pieces. They're like, oh, there was like, you flew over the United States or, whatever. And nobody remembers unless it's their thing, right? But because they'll be like, I don't remember, the calling of the Scottish clans. I don't remember Aida at, the display of that. I don't remember anything about going to Cypress Gardens in Florida and watching, these young girls in their fake Southern Belle costumes strip off their hoop skirts in order to like do the aquacade and water ski. Like that's what that movie was really about. And it's gone from popular memory. And that kind of purpose-built immersive experience tends to disappear as a plot, as a narrative, as a set of things that you hold except for the experience of it. And that's part of why Avatar, when people remember things, they remember the general arc, because again, the plot's a retread, but also, as Devin was saying, those opening 3.5 minutes are wild. And part of the reason that they're so wild is that in the spaceship scenes that you cut to between the crematorium sequence, you're seeing 3D be used for incredible depth. And the depth work of the 3D is so stunning when it's large format that you can't help but be impressed by it in those moments. It's brand new experience. And the people floating around look like they're really floating around. It's really very, very well done technically. And then the plot is, as you said, on rails after that. So I think that some of this forgetting has a lot to do with the experientialization of the movie going. As movie going became event driven, and that's, obviously, I'm talking about stuff from the early 1950s. Eventizing movies was a strategy, as far back as, Birth of a Nation. Like, this is not new, but when it becomes deeply experiential, it tends to shade off from these kinds of processes that we go through that make memories, that make plot investments, that make us want to do, like, explore them. So that's, I think, a really big part of why that's the case. And it's unrecapturable. And this is the other part of that. I've got This Is Cinerama on a Blu-ray disc, and they've sort of fake curved it. They call it smile boxing. and it's okay. I've got Avatar on a Blu-ray disc. It's okay, but like, it's not the thing. The thing was the experience. And even on my ancient 3D TV, which I continue to like have around so that I can watch these things on these old 3D Blu-rays, it doesn't do the same kind of thing. And so that's part of why it's so forgettable for people. Everyone who went to see it can remember going, but they couldn't re-experience it in the same way.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That makes a lot of sense to me. Because I remember, like, seeing Avatar and, really feeling like it was more like those kind of like those rides you go on in Universal Studios or something. Like there's like the Star Wars ride that I had gone to when I was like in 8th grade or whatever. That sort of is like
that's Disney World. You keep
Sorry.
doing this. You keep assuming all these rides happen at Universal.
Was even back then Star Wars was in Disney?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
George Lucas, Michael Jackson, Captain EO, Disney.
Got it. I went to both of them. We only could afford one trip to Florida, so we did both of the same week. So in my mind, they're all collapsed. I don't. What's at Universal Studios then? What did I see there?
Raiders of the Lost Ark, Jurassic
Okay.
Park.
Okay. Yeah.
Minions, Spider-Man.
Oh yeah, Spider-Man for sure. But anyway, you know, like those kind of things that were sort of like these, like the ride was essentially like a short-ish movie with like this immersive stuff with like the seat moving and like, you know, it kind of felt like Avatar was this way of like sort of exporting that kind of experience to where you could like go have it locally without having to like go on a vacation and stay in a hotel. But again, yeah, you don't like, I don't remember what the plot was of like the Star Wars ride that we went on.
So have either of you gone to Walt Disney World to do the Avatar land, the Pandora land?
No, I saw that it had opened though.
Yeah, finally.
Have you?
I have not, but that's just because of the pandemic and other kinds of sync problems. However, we live in a world where you can just call up a total ride through on YouTube, and I have because of my day job, I have done this. And in fact, the flying ride is a VR. You know, you clip into a seat that's like, in effect, being in the saddle of one of the Banshees, and you do fly around and do things. That's one of the rides. So it's exactly the attempt to try to continue the experience in this ride way. And there is, there is a narrative baked into that where you are supposedly helping them to study the habits of the Banshees, right? You're not like going to go fight a war. And then the other ride that's associated with the Pandora Land is a boat ride. You know, it's a sort of the majesty and neon day glow colors of Pandora, and you ride on a little raft through the landscape. Anyway, so the point is that like 10, 15 years later, they figured out how to crack open this story and put some of those experiential aspects that were essential to the movie's success into the theme park where they are more naturally at home. I don't think anybody is like, objects to the fact that some of the theming and plotting around these big, dark rides is kind of forgettable because the experience was overwhelming. That's sort of half the point. But Avatar finally found its way there, at least. Yeah, at Disney. And it's only at Disney World too, so.
It's interesting hearing about the VR piece of that, because it makes me think as well about the experience of watching Avatar in 2009, and maybe more so the slew of 3D films that came right after, where for me, the biggest thing was I fucking hate these 3D glasses. It sucks to wear them on top of normal glasses.
Yeah.
And so to me, it became a turnoff of me. I was like, I'm going to see Avatar, and oh, that was really cool. But very quickly to me, I'm like, beyond just the gimmickiness of the 3D, it's not an enjoyable experience for me as someone who has to either try to cram contacts in and hope my eyes don't dry out, or try to like flop these 3D glasses on top of my normal glasses. So to me, that became a drawback of the experience, the 3D thing. But it was so new with Avatar that I didn't have that conception at that point. So yeah.
Well, it's interesting too, right? Because like also 3D makes a lot of people sick, and like queasy, And I remember this being like, this was a thing like people were talking about at the time of like, and there was almost this like, I feel like I remember there being this like cultural peer pressure to be like, listen, you need to go to this. You need to make yourself sick. You need to, because this is the future. You have to experience it. So like, this idea of like, this like mass spectacle that is like actually like literally actively making people like sick to their stomach, but you have to go to it because it's like, it just became like the thing to go to at a certain point.
One of the things that drives that is the rollout to exhibitors. I think we all pretty much have a sense of how sort of direct to consumer marketing works for movies, with the standees and the commercials and everything else. But when you want to market a giant experiential movie, it's really important to put it in front of large audiences. And you can't do that with sufficient lead time to do that with like regular sneak previews, because those happen usually like a week or two, right? The word of mouth screenings happen like a week or two before the release date. So the key group here are exhibitors, and what's now called Cinecon and was then called Show West. It's this huge convention in Vegas, and each of the studios, comes and does their bit. It's still the same now, basically, but you would show 15, maybe 20 minutes of stuff, sort of the way that Comic-Con can work. And if you show somebody 15 or 20 minutes of truly epic 3D, they'll spot you whatever the plot nightmare is that's around the corner. And so the immediate reaction is, you've got to go see this. This is such an experience, because it was literally just the experience for those exhibitors who are booking this into, 7 of their, 14 screens or whatever at every multiplex. So that long form, that long form pre-trailer kind of thing was really important for Avatar. They've done exactly the same thing with Avatar 2. This is, this is one of the crucial pieces of marketing that's a little less visible than, the billboard as you drive down Sunset Boulevard or something.
Yeah. And so like related to all these kind of questions, something I'd like to like talk about, and especially hear what you think about, JD, is sort of the ways in which Avatar is both kind of like exemplary, but also exceptional to the sort of like blockbuster, the kind of blockbuster movies we get today in 2022, right? Like, Avatar's the, like, I think if you don't adjust for inflation, the highest grossing movie of all time. And, it's kind of like a weird one in some ways. Like, it's like the way, to me, it reminds me of the way that the greatest selling album of all time is that one, Eagles' Greatest Hits. And it's just like, wait, what? That one? Really? But in some ways, it's like kind of, there's like a positive spin to Avatar being number one, because it actually is an original filmic property, right? Like it's, and then you look at the rest of the top 10, and it's almost all franchises, which I know Avatar is about to become a franchise when the sequel comes out, but Avengers Endgame is second. James Cameron has Titanic also in the top 3, which is kind of the other film that is sort of like against type for these. And then it's mostly comic book movies, Jurassic World, Furious 7 is 10th. That's surprising to me. But like it both simultaneously seems to sort of like augur, everyone at home take a drink. I say that word all the time. The coming of the like every film being this huge blockbuster that's like, the pleading for people to see it in theaters because you have to see it in theaters because it's so big and stuff. But it also isn't part of one of these, like, it's not part of the MCU. It's not part of the Star Wars universe. So like, I don't know. I'm just like kind of curious, like what it means for like the number one film, and really for the way that James Cameron is sort of this guy who has managed to get like 2 films into the top 3 without relying on, like I don't think anyone would credit the Russo brothers really with Avengers Endgame being second overall, right? Like it has much more to do with the whole MCU phenomenon. But it's interesting to me how Cameron has been able to find these like more kind of like film original properties that make so much money.
They make so much money. They absolutely do. And Cameron's relationship with that money is both very new Hollywood in that it's someone else's money. So not even like the Francis Ford Coppola, if this movie isn't a hit, I lose my winery and my daughter level of like mortgaging his future. Like this is someone else's money. And so he's immediately got them over a barrel, to the extent that, on Titanic, famously Fox got, we ended up with a Fox Paramount partnership there. They're just like, this is too much money for any one studio, even in Hollywood, to risk. So we'll go halvesies on it. And they brought Paramount in to basically fund what they thought was going to be half the budget, but ended up being like a third of the budget because it just kept going up. So the immediate like relationship to the studio is, I want all of your money and you're fucked if this movie doesn't go. And something similar was the case with Avatar. I want all of your money and it's risky and you're screwed, but not me. I'm making this movie and, it'll work. And that, one of the reasons why the Art of Avatar book is a kind of odd thing is that they don't know that Avatar is going to be this movie. It was written to, it was written to be published coincidentally with the movie's release. And so the producer, John Landau, is like, I hope this makes money, but we don't know. The flip side of that, and we'll just use the MCU as the counter example because it's coincident with it, is that money is not any of the director's money, but also they do not regard themselves as having the studio over a barrel. That they are hired, I don't want to say like old-fashioned TV directors to do a job of work, but closer to that than, oh my goodness, Steven Spielberg has us, it has gone out of control. Steven Spielberg never goes out of control. It's not that. It's not that version of auteurism, that sort of financially oppositional version of auteurism that we associate with the New Hollywood and so on. And it's also not that sort of like high concept 1980s easily managed storytelling where you reduce the story to its bare minimum, the Top Gun model, so that you can concentrate on all the other cool stuff that's going to make this go. The story's simple, so the flight sequences can be amazing. It's a little more like that, certainly, than other things. So you put those together and you've got a very old school model of what directing is like. The director wants things, somebody else has very much his money, and they will fight about it. The MCU doesn't work that way. The threat to the MCU was never that a director was going to go broke, but that the process wasn't going to take off, that the system wasn't going to get launched. And here, like, you need to know just that the key moment for Marvel is the declaration of independence in about 2005, when they get this enormous line of credit from Merrill Lynch. Marvel had gone bankrupt. Their assets were scattered to the winds like the limbs of Osiris. And so pieces were at Fox and pieces were at Universal and pieces were at Columbia. And pieces were left with Marvel Entertainment, the sort of B tier folks like Iron Man. And they got this line of credit that said, we will secure this against the rights to these 10 characters. So, Kevin Feige wasn't going to be homeless if the movies didn't perform, but the characters were the asset, as opposed to Francis Ford Coppola's winery. Like, it was literally the difference there. And by getting it off the ground the way they did, they could then fold that money back in, produce what looked like a sustainably independent production model. And it was so wildly attractive that Disney was willing to pay, for control. And so the way that Marvel needed to run its stable of IP, Captain America, Iron Man, Thor, right at the beginning, they needed you to want to see the next one more than anything, so that they could continue to facilitate the securitization of this IP. Like it's built on IP, but it's built on a very specific pre-2008 vision of what the worth of IP is, which is a kind of permanent cycling. James Cameron doesn't give a shit about any of that while he is like building out 3D technology and trying to figure out how to make motion capture performance seem realistic. Like he is working in a very different, entirely old school model in that way. How do I get actors to do things? How do I get, my technology to do things? This is not very different from Steven Spielberg saying, how do we get the shark to do what we want and still have Robert Shaw deliver a Robert Shaw performance? How do we get, those people to do that? So those are the two models that exist in 2008, 2009. And the reason, this is to pull the plug on the whole big Megillah here, but the big reason that Avatar is forgettable is that it's produced in a model that doesn't care whether you see yourself so deeply inside it that you have to see the next one. Where Marvel is built financially, and even more so after the financial crisis hits, around this sense that every one of these things has to lead like a daisy chain into the next one. That's the only way the rights and the IP can maintain their value. And that's the thing that actually undergirds the whole process, not the technology. And almost every decision Marvel makes after that is consistent with that. It's part of the brilliance of the Kevin Feige model. It's like, do they have the best special effects? They do not. Will they hold a movie because the 3D technology isn't performing up to speed? They will not. They will make their dates. They will make their budgets. They will part ways with successful directors in public, in ways that you would think would cost them. And that's because it's the way this system works. And that's internal to them. And the external effect of that on us as viewers, one of the truly, impressive things is that we can care our way into all sorts of nooks and crannies of the Marvel character library that are unthinkable in any prior era. Guardians of the Galaxy is not a $1 billion movie in any prior world. A group of people no one's ever heard of, and so on. So anyway, so that's, I think, part of why the forgettableness is baked into it. It's baked into the mode of production, which is then like mirrored in a very specific kind of attention that we give. And it's part of why when people talk about Avatar being forgotten, they say things like, and here I have done my homework, that somebody went and like looked up an archive of our own. This was, it was Frederick Bleichert. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing his name. He's smart. He wrote this article for Vice. Sorry.
Someone's on the way to see Avatar 2. Right?
That's right. Notes that the body of Avatar fan fiction is remarkably tiny. He could only find 198 pieces of Avatar fan fiction, where there were 160,000 entries for Marvel's Avengers. And they're temporally coincident. There is more fan fiction in which Thor and Iron Man are doing it than there is in the entire Avatar fanfic world. And that expansion is just left on the table by Fox, by Cameron, by this particular storytelling. And
that's great, JD. And like that what you were saying there about like the way like the MCU machinery kind of like makes us care about these characters, I think is really important, because like I remember being like a huge comic book nerd in the 90s, right? Like I don't even know if the Guardians of Galaxy like existed, or like they were like very, very fringe, right? Like even someone that now, Iron Man, like, kind of like probably the most popular superhero of the MCU, right? Was like a bargain bin superhero pretty much. It was like X-Men, it was Batman, of course, right? Like, and I remember like I taught English in South Korea for a bit, and like all of my little kids, like my kindergarten kids' favorite superhero was Iron Man. And like the idea that someone's like, as like an Asian comic book nerd, the idea that someone's favorite superhero would be Iron Man was so strange to me, right? But it's like, it's not that Iron Man was this super popular superhero in like, when that movie came out. The movies made him a super popular superhero, right? Like it's not like, people knew who he was, but that's what they made him that. And like, to the extent that like, the Fantastic Four, who Marvel didn't have the rights to, although I guess they have them now, right? Because
because they were part of
Office
Fox
guy,
and now they get spun back in. Yeah.
But like Marvel stopped making that comic book, which was like their oldest running series at some point, because it's just like, if it's not nothing, everything they're doing is in service of this, IP machine, like you were saying. And they were like, well, why are we doing favors for another movie studio by continuing to produce what's like maybe like our most, besides Spider-Man, maybe the most iconic Marvel property. But like it didn't matter, right?
Yeah, and now that it's all back, like they can fire it all up, yet again. I think it's no accident that, I mean, why would anything be an accident? But I think it's no accident that this hyper surveillant model of consumption, whether that's soft in the form of archive of our own, like self-authorization, or hard in the sort of toxic fandom that's, congealed around Star Wars, that coincides with the moment that a country that's devoted to this global war on terror model, which begins long ago, but let's just date it to 2001, hits its own economic limits in 2008, 2009. Like you put those two things together, this ungodly constraint that no one thought in the West was like on the horizon for this economy, and you match it with a complete failure to achieve anything like the political aims that had been set out for the West as a result of 9/11. And what are you going to do? Well, you're going to pay some more attention, maybe. And the cultivation of that intention as a way of maybe warding off another financial crisis, as a way of warding off another terrorist attack, as a way of warding off this sense that the society has abandoned you and you are like entirely anonymous somewhere else. Those all work in concert. And sometimes they become the thematic of it, as in Avatar or in Iron Man. And sometimes they just become the sort of like baseline modality of the new fandom that can be capitalized on by, other very savvy multimedia conglomerates who want to sell you, whatever, BTS. You got to pay attention, and you got to pay attention is not the model of Avatar. Avatar's model is you gotta see this, you got to experience it.
Yeah, and you have to subsume yourself to the movie in a way, right? Like a big part of the MCU, right, is like there's like kind of like a little choose your own adventure within the MCU. You have preferences, like I'm an Iron Man guy, my friend's a Captain America guy, or whatever. There's a kind of like personality one can cultivate by being a Marvel fan, and present to the world. You can't really do that with Avatar, right? Like unless you're like a really big fan of Giovanni Ribisi, I guess.
Right. Yeah. Or to put it another way, like the Snyder cult, like gathered around DC, there isn't a cult of people who are like, well, James Cameron needed a little more authority in all of this. He didn't get exact. Like it doesn't exist. You are so subservient to that vision because of the way that conflictual auteurism is structured, that there's no point in objecting to the version you've got. And so there's no point in adding your own version, which is to say there's no reason to write a piece of fanfic or, to dress up and so on. And this goes all the way down to, kind of the design model. Star Wars is perfectly positioned because it's structured as an auteurist project. It's consolidated as George Lucas's, thing. But when the design of each individual shot is happening and the populations that are in the background, that decision to make it seem lived in, the decision to give it sort of, fibers that spread out into unknown stories was incredibly savvy. The version of this is the meme, OMG, Glup Shido is back, right? When somebody would see some backdrop character, and you get that in The Mandalorian par excellence, right? That's why that show works. And my contention is that that's this new generalized version of viewing. And so I make that joke about Mank, that the way that the classical Hollywood stars and figures show up in Mank is as Star Wars, secondary characters who are back. OMG, Dory Sherry is back, whatever it would be. And that attention, I think, is general now.
Yeah, I think there's a moment in Avatar that sort of captures this difference, right? Which is because we're mostly dealing with the one tribe, but there's actually many tribes in Avatar, and there is this kind of montage sequence after Jake has tamed Toruk, where they like go to the other tribes. And this kind of would be the moment where it's like, oh, we're adding some like lived in kind of texture. Like there are these other sort of, there's this kind of lived inness to the universe that this would be the kind of thing like someone would write an entire fan fiction about the tribe we only see for a second, but all the tribes just look the same. It's just more blue people. There's a couple little different, like this one, they're wearing like kind of like slightly different paint maybe or something, but like it just doesn't inspire that kind of intrigue the way like you're watching. I remember like being a kid and you would have the action figure from Star Wars for like the guy that's standing there when they're I can't remember the name, but like the sand dune eating thing while they're like pushing Luke into that.
The Sarlacc?
The Sarlacc, yeah. Like the guy that's standing by the Sarlacc pit. I had his action figure, and I had never even read any of the extended universe novels, but you in your head, you have this whole like, you're like, what's this guy's deal? You're like imagining it. You can't really do that with Avatar because it's so insisting. It's just like this is what it is. And it's kind of the Gaia hypothesis nature of it too, right? Like it's like everything becomes one.
Right. And you can see the exact like flip side of that in the way that Black Panther handled its multiple Wakandan tribes.
Exactly.
They each have their own design language. They have shared consistency, the ability to sell those different tribes, whether that's in the form of like cognitive space or mere merch, is something that Disney and Marvel were insistent upon. It clearly then could play back into everything that made Black Panther a success. And they could say, well, see, our production designer is great, our costume designer is great, our director is great, because not only did they give you this like core family, but all of these other tribes, whereas all of the Na'vi from the outlying tribes are basically Na'vi, and nobody wants to like, embody those folks or, dress up like them for Halloween, as the as the joke goes. And I think that's right, that there's more, there could have been more space for those things, but the totalizing figure of the planet hurts it, but also Cameron's vision of what how an organic society functions, because these are not really characters by and large. So it's a big difference.
So I'd be curious, before we wrap up here, we've talked about, Devin and I, on the podcast before, how James Cameron always seems to understand the zeitgeist better than anybody else. And so we joke about how, like, he made Titanic and then immediately he's off, like, figuring out 3D blue people when all of us had no idea what was going on. And he's done this consistently at Aliens and Titanic and Avatar, maybe most famously Piranha 2: The Spawning. But now when I think of Avatar: The Way of the Water and whatever Avatar 3 is, like the foray into fire or something, whatever it's going to be, I struggle to think of like, how is this going to be quite the moneymaker or the point of talk that Avatar was. And now again, I feel like we've been through this so much with James Cameron where it's always like, well, that's not going to, maybe it just won't pan out that way. But it seems like he always has his finger on the pulse of understanding how to make these cultural moments. So I'm curious if you have any thoughts about how does Avatar: The Way of the Water like capture that sort of cultural moment or like discourse in the way that things like Aliens and Titanic did. Maybe you just think it won't, but I'm curious, is there some, because we already done 3D. So I'm curious if you have any thoughts, JD, about if and how it will be able to do that.
All right. This is a very hard question because I don't actually think like James Cameron. but so this is sort of method acting my way into James Cameron, which is not pleasant, right? I mean, part of it is also, right, he's notoriously the hardest person to work for in Hollywood, just like on a day-to-day basis. Rick Carter, who was the production designer, one of the production designers on Avatar, he said for 18 months, he basically commuted to New Zealand because he was working with Weta to do all that stuff. And he was like, it was great because when I was in New Zealand and Jim was in Los Angeles, it was harder for him to yell at me, right? Like it's like, so this is a hard bit of mental cosplay. All right, I'm going to talk about it as the end of big tech, the end of the romance of big tech. So Avatar comes out in 2009, and in 2010, Mark Zuckerberg starts killing his own food. And I think this is an absolutely essential moment in the weirdness. This is as essential as Jack Dorsey's silent retreat, to creating a particular ideology of big tech. That there's, for Zuckerberg, the appearance of responsibility for what you do must take the form of actually committing at some level the violence upon which you feed. And he is given enormous credit for this at the time. Okay, the rest of us are just like, you freak. But like, he's given a lot of credit for taking responsibility for this and for like going out and killing a pig and killing his food for like a year. I don't have an issue with anything people choose to eat, but I do think they should take responsibility and be thankful for what they eat rather than trying to ignore where it came from. And that's that scene where Jake learns to kill and apologize and thank them for that. So if that moment is that, even though the way I've described this movie as really being about like the financial crisis and the sort of old model, pre-financial crisis model, then the end of big tech provides the place for Cameron to see what comes next. Like if he knew what Zuckerberg was going to do a year in advance, he must know, in this sort of version of the all-encompassing, all-knowing, all-seeing James Cameron, he must know what the end of our romance of big tech looks like in 2024, 2025, and that's what would latch into the zeitgeist or whatever we want to say. And the end of that, we probably like to think, looks like some form of solidarity. And I think his arrogance and pessimism and individualism will say that what it looks like is a set of siloed privatizations around technology, that sort of like proprietary discords are the future, and the rediscovery of the link between those discords. So reinventing the romance of the public sphere, which gives him both the left and the right credibility, that seems to play right down the center. The sense that what we have are really privatized social lives as opposed to hyper publicized ones, gives him the contrarian model. So I'm as far out on the limb as I can go here to say that I think that's what where this could get a toehold, this sense that the problem is that we are in our private societies and we need to transcend those, which no one thinks is the problem right now.
Yeah.
Right.
I will be very curious how it pans out when Avatar 2 drops.
Yeah, no, can't wait. Or I can actually, but I don't get to. None of us get to. In the United States, Avatar comes out on you or something. Shall we talk about our Build Back Better plan, Ethan?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
So as the listeners know, we always like to discuss, because, we spend a lot of time taking these movies down, but we also like to build them back up. Again, do use hashtag Build Back Better to let us know your ideas about how to improve the movies. And I don't know how to say this every week.
Every week.
what does this have to do with Biden? I don't know what you're talking about. Leave me alone. We are not a political podcast. We don't want to get into that stuff. This is about making movies better.
Yes.
So
exclusively use that hashtag for our podcast from henceforth.
So Ethan, what's your plan for building Avatar back better?
Yeah. My thoughts, hard to, of course, improve upon Avatar. We've been talking about the kind of innovations of Avatar and what it brought. Really the focus with the 3D. I think I would have actually preferred a 4D Avatar. And I'm not talking about the kind of like fourth dimension is smell or that sort of thing. Like, I think Avatar should exist beyond time and space. And I say this perhaps in anticipation that James Cameron has already done this. We simply aren't aware of how just by existing in linear time. But so maybe we will get there, but that would be my recommendation to improve Avatar. Go from 3D to go 4 dimensions. What about you, Devin?
I like that idea because I think there's a good chance, like the way we saw Avatar and can't remember it, like there's a chance Avatar 2 will come out and we will somehow have already experienced it before actually seeing it, right? It's going to somehow hack the time loops. For me, it's just honestly more Giovanni Ribisi. He, we talked about how you can't remember Avatar. The only thing I have consistently remembered from Avatar is Ribisi's line delivery on "I love this putter" when he's like playing golf in the station or whatever. He kind of falls out of the movie. He doesn't really get to participate in the fight scenes. We see him kind of demurely leaving the planet at the end, but I would like to have seen Ribisi have to suit up a little bit. Get into one of those fancy robot suits maybe, or how about a Giovanni Ribisi as Na'vi Avatar? That's something I would like to see. Still wearing the tie though.
That's a great idea, because they have like the one scene when the military's finally going in, which he's entirely complicit in, but he like pans him and he's just like, oh shucks, I can't believe it's come to this, as if it wasn't inevitable. Mm-hmm. So maybe they have that scene where he's trying to actually fight the colonel beforehand, be like, no, I believe in ethical capitalism. You can't do this. And he's overpowered despite his intention to, of course, resolve this in any way that doesn't involve violence. So yeah, maybe some more of him.
I do wonder, like, I would like to do the Avatar fan fiction about what Giovanni Ribisi does after he like gets kicked off Pandora, presumably fired. I don't know. I could see him like launching like a Senate campaign. He has a little bit of like sort of like Pete Buttigieg energy, maybe.
Anyway, I was going to say that because he feels bad about the thing that he is uniquely responsible for, he's got big Robert McNamara energy, right?
Oh, yeah.
For Cameron, we haven't talked about the you got your 9/11 in my Vietnam and you got your Vietnam in my 9/11 problem. But Giovanni Ribisi feels like very much the 9/11 guy who is also like discovering that he's Robert McNamara and feeling bad about it. So I don't think he'll go back to Earth and run for Senate or whatever, because McNamara wouldn't have wanted that. But he might very well end up the Secretary of Defense in a modestly reformist, neo-imperial, Earth state.
Start writing, Devin.
Yeah. All right. What about you, JD?
Well, I have to say I like both of these plans, but what I always want is more kitschy commerce associated with this. There's no Burger King on the base. The little tanning beds that they get into are not part of a "we will remember it for you" wholesale, like private, Total Recall kind of enterprise. Yes, it's one giant mining corporation, but I think if we learned anything from the failed occupations of Iraq, it's that the Halliburton wasn't alone, that there had to be somebody like distributing the Budweiser to the guys who were on the base, and there had to be somebody who was making bank, setting up the video calls so they could visit their PTSD upon their families who were stateside and suffering on their own. Like all of those things are there. And that's not just to make the place more lived in, but really just to go back to that sort of 2001 sense that you got to have, if you're going to have capitalism, you're going to have all of it. And when the mining company comes to town, the people who make the real money are the people selling the tools and the blue jeans and the sex work and so on.
Yeah. Well, and it seems too like, you know, we got cheated of like a scene of like a Na'vi with like, you know, a box of dominoes or something.
Right.
I love like, I'm a huge sucker for just, you know, like classic comedy of like something's hilariously small or hilariously big, you know, like the Leslie Nielsen movies when he like picks up a cappuccino and it's just like, you know, like 4 feet wide, makes me laugh every time. So like, you know, one of the Na'vi trying to like kind of like open up like very preciously like a box of dominoes and like popping the slices in, or maybe just the whole pie.
This is a large. Yeah, that's good stuff. But and the opportunity was there and missed because Sigourney Weaver's character, her Na'vi, for some reason has a Stanford shirt that she wears everywhere in order to provide, you know, decorous coverage of her chest. And she does not gift, when she dies, that Stanford sweatshirt or whatever is not gifted to her brilliant Na'vi student to carry on the legacy of, you know, the venture capital epicenter to Pandora.
Yeah. I love that she had that shirt made.
She had to have it made, right? Like And where do you have it made? Like it takes 5 years or whatever to get to Pandora. So like it takes 5 years for the light speed communication to get back to Earth. She's like, all right, so there was, call the people at Stanford. I need something like really big. Like get me Zazzle on the phone. I need like this 7XL. I want you to cut the sleeves off and then send it on the next available troop transport along with the putter. And yeah, that's great.
All right, and it's the moment we've all been waiting for. As always, it's time to dish out the Shia LaBeoufs. Ethan, where are you at with Avatar?
So I think that a lot of our conversation has kind of gone beyond the quantifiable. And of course, within Avatar, we know that that's inexcusable. To quote Dr. Augustine, I'm not talking about that pagan voodoo here. Again, a very well-versed anthropological stance to take. But what she does say is that, you know, it's not any of that. No, actually, this whole planet, we have, what does she say? There's each tree has 10 to the 4th connections, and the trees around it, and there's 10 to the 12th trees on Pandora. And that's what makes it all valid to not raise the Na'vi's community, because we can quantify it. And so what I'm thinking is for the Shia LaBeoufs is if you have the 10 to the 4th connections of each tree and you have 10 to the 12th power of trees, if you give just one of those trees 10 to the 2nd power Shia LaBeoufs, I mean, we're talking about 10 to the 18th power Shia LaBeoufs. And so I'm going to put mine in the range of between 10 to the 18th and 10 to the 20th power Shia LaBeoufs for Avatar.
Yeah. You know, I was only going to give this film one Shia, but it would be like one Shia taking like a heroic stance, but like going down fighting. But then just as you think it's over, on the brink of the horizon, you see like all of the Shia LaBeoufs, the entire planet banding together and coming together to increase the rating for the film to like, you know, a solid like 3 out of 5, 2.5 maybe. I don't really know, because I got to be honest, I watched it a week ago, and as we've thoroughly discussed, I can't remember it.
It's gone. Yeah.
It's in one ear, out the other. What about you, JD?
I didn't know it was an out of number. I thought it was just a summation.
Oh, it's however you want to interpret.
This is 5 for me. This is 5 Shia LaBeoufs. It's 1 Sam Witwicky for running around like a doofus in his new Avatar, which seem to be like entirely inherited from the Witwiki modus. One, howardcantor.com for stealing Roger Dean's Yes album covers for the floating mountains. One, Sam Witwiki for technological mastery as the Tarak Makto. One, the tax collector for a deeply regrettable racial migration at the end of it. If you've not seen the tax collector, that's where Shia performs as an enforcer for the Mexican drug cartels. And one, Peanut Butter Falcon for actually putting sincerity at the top of the box office, which, Peanut Butter Falcon was the most successful indie movie of its year. And people have forgotten that, I think, as well. So gets me to 5.
Awesome. Great execution of the Shia system. The Shia system, the only rule about the Shias is there are no rules. So, all about how you want to interpret it. All right. Well, JD, thanks so much for coming on. Is there anything you'd like to plug? Anywhere listeners can find you on the internet or whatnot?
I tweet stupidly at JD Connor. You can read the stuff I have written at the entirely James Cameron appropriate www.johnconnorlikeintheterminator.com, because that is my actual name. And I am on sabbatical. So if you want me to come give a talk at your institution or hang out for lunch or perform at a bar mitzvah, I am freer than I have been in years. So just hit me up and I'll get back to you.
Awesome. And we'll stick the links and your Twitter handle in the show notes. Once again, thanks so much for joining us. I don't think we would have made it through Avatar without you.
For that, I'll apologize yet again.
And we'll have to have you back on when The Way of Water comes out. If we're all alive, if the singularity hasn't happened by then.
All right.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for listening to You're Told What I'm Saying in Front of You. Please find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or the podcast app of your choice, and do give us a 5-star rating. You can follow us on Twitter at YourTallPod, follow Ethan at Mathisipi, or follow me at Stale Cooper. If you have thoughts about what you'd like us to talk about next, DM us on Twitter or email us pod@gmail.com.